Hi friends, your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Stranger Things, Season 2, Episode 2, Trick or Treat Freak, uh, and um, and basically we're going to dig in with Nancy and Steve Harrington. So this this is rough to watch in real time. Nancy is in this situation where it's Steve Harrington, or it's going to be Steve Harrington, or it's going to be Jonathan Byers. Uh, we already know Steve Harrington is a terrible person. He now has an inkling that he's a terrible person, and he's trying to come away from that cliff. But he's got a lot of momentum toward being that jock jerk that smashed Jonathan Byers' camera. But Jonathan Byers is a hard sell, right? So why is he a hard sell? This is interesting. So this is the 80s, right? And Nancy Wheeler is a lady woman. She's like, I'm a girl. I'd like to be a lady. And she is like, I'd like a house. I'd like a husband. I'd like that husband to support me and our children, right? And Jonathan Byers is not super non-communicative, has a abominable father figure, has absolutely zero, there's no functioning family there, right? So the idea that he would be a good father is highly experimental, because he literally doesn't know, he's never seen what a good father looks like, in his own life. And Steve Harrington, sounds like his parents got some problems too, but they are functioning as a nuclear family, right? So Steve Harrington has a concept and even has a path, and he has even communicated to Nancy that he wants all of that. He wants to be her husband, and he wants to give her the American dream. And in the 80s, when gender roles were pretty rigid still, that was attractive. That's attractive to Nancy, where, what is the benefits again on Jonathan Byers? And you're like, I don't know, right? So now, actually, there are some benefits on Jonathan Byers. Let's list those off. He's brave. She knows this, right? He's also subversive and counterculture. That is not great commercially, but man, that is it's kind of dope, and so he's got his own vibe, right? And we also, so Jonathan Byers is a tough sell, right? The other thing is he has a family who really needs him. Nancy's not even sure how much bandwidth he has to be anybody's, and I think even Jonathan Byers is a little bit hesitant to sign on as a boyfriend to anybody, because I don't know if he thinks he has any bandwidth, and he might be right. He is clearly taking on a lot of the father figure role in his family, trying to do and he is extremely dedicated to his brother. And guess what? His brother legit needs him, right? Where Nancy and Mike take their parents for granted because their parents deliver all the time, right? Jonathan Byers is not taking anything for granted. He knows he has to support his mother, and he has to support his brother. They're hanging on by a wing, and what is Bon Jovi's a prayer, hanging on by a prayer, right? He legit is doing a lot for his family. So what kind of bandwidth is he gonna have for whoever boyfriend he ends up being, right? Very interesting. So, but Nancy is starting to get really frustrated with Steve. And one of the reasons why is Steve is incredibly self-protective, right? So Nancy's like, hey, we got to tell Barb's mom and dad that, Barb is dead. Because at this point, they're mortgaging their house to get Murray Bauman to investigate their daughter's disappearance. And the father's like, because Jim Hopper isn't investigating it. Guess what? Barb's dad is 100% right. Jim Hopper isn't investigating anything, right? Jim Hopper already knows Barb is dead and has not told those parents, because the Hawkins lab is like, you guys got to keep this under wrap. It's rough to be, when you are singled out and when you are silenced, that's rough. That is really, really rough, right? So basically at this point, Nancy is very unhappy with Steve Harrington, and they end up going to a party which Steve asked her to go to. And that's another thing is, like, you know, there's like, here's the other one, right? You know, there's basically Steve's like, oh, let's go to this party, we'll get drunk and we'll have some fun. You know, well, guess what? Like, there's a real cost to that, right? You stay sober or you invite a world of problems. Absolutely none of these kids in high school have any business pursuing any recreational substances. And I do really kind of appreciate how destructive, how the Duffer Brothers show that, you know, recreational substances experimentation at a young age is incredibly destructive. And that's exactly what happens to Nancy. So Steve brings her to a drinking party. She drinks, right? And he encourages her to drink, right? And then it goes sideways. And she's like, I don't love you, right? She just says it flat out. And then the next day, you know, she's like, she got blackout drunk. And she's also like, I want to tell Barb's parents, right? She's genuinely sorrowful. And guess what? She has every reason to be genuinely sorrowful. Barb's death is her fault, right? Like, this is really wild. So at this point, finally, we reach the point where she is genuinely, like, she's sad, and then the next day she tells Steve, I don't love you. Now, she's drunk at the time, right? And she doesn't remember it, but Steve does, and he knows she's serious, right? So at this point, Steve and her are kind of like kaputs, and because he knows, like, and that kind of, and I think this is the point where they really, you know, they had a breakup before, and now they have a real breakup, like. And I do think this is very realistic, where a lot of relationships are like this, where the bounce, it takes a while, right? So at this point, they do, you know, they're kind of reaching their full breakup. Also at this point, Mike Wheeler is really trying to find 11. And 11 is still being kept from the boys, all right? So we'll cut it off there, and every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.